Before you decide this story isn't for you, let me say this slowly. There are wounds that don't bleed. There are scars no one can see. And there are women who live their entire lives hurting quietly because the world taught them that pain only counts when it's loud. He never hit me. He never screamed. He never raised his voice. And for a long time, I believed that meant I was safe. People admired our marriage. They called him calm, patient, respectable. They told me I was lucky. I learned to smile when they said that, even when something inside me felt hollow. Because how do you explain emptiness to people who only understand chaos? How do you describe loneliness when you're never physically alone? In the beginning, I felt chosen. He paid attention to my words. He listened, or at least I believed he did. I felt important standing beside him. I felt like I mattered. But slowly, so slowly that I didn't notice the change, his interest faded. Not love, interest. And interest is what tells a woman that she exists. Conversations became shorter. Questions disappeared. Eye contact felt rushed. When I spoke about my day, he nodded without looking up. When I shared something emotional, he seemed distracted. I told myself he was tired. I told myself I was expecting too much. I told myself all marriages settle into quiet. I adjusted without realizing I was adjusting. I softened my tone. I shortened my stories. I laughed less loudly. I chose my words carefully. And when I still felt disappointed, I blamed myself for feeling that way. Women are very good at that, turning neglect into self-doubt as the years passed. Silence became normal. It sat between us at dinner. It followed us into bed. It wrapped itself around my thoughts. I learned to fill my days with responsibility, so I wouldn't have time to feel. Children, housework, family. I stayed busy because stillness made the loneliness louder. I became very useful, very reliable, very strong. I carried everything without complaint, and people praised me for it. They called me a good wife, a good mother. No one asked if I was a happy woman. No one noticed how tired my eyes looked, even when I smiled at night. When the house finally slept, my thoughts refused to rest. I would lie beside him, staring at the ceiling, wondering how someone could feel so far away while lying inches from you. Sometimes I turned toward him, hoping he might sense my sadness. But he slept peacefully, untouched by the storm inside me. Whenever I tried to speak about how I felt, he didn't argue. He didn't shout. He dismissed it gently. You think too much. You're too emotional. Nothing is wrong. And because his words were calm, I believed them. I began to question my own feelings instead of his absence. Slowly, without realizing it, I started disappearing. I stopped wearing clothes that made me feel beautiful. I stopped sharing opinions that might start conversations. I stopped asking for reassurance. I stopped expecting affection. I told myself I didn't need much. That needing less made me easier to love. There were moments I caught my reflection and felt unfamiliar with the woman staring back. She looked older than her years, quieter, like someone who had been waiting for permission to exist. And every time that feeling surfaced, I pushed it down, because acknowledging it felt dangerous. The children grew, and I poured myself into them. I gave them everything I had. They became my purpose, my distraction, my excuse to stay. Watching him be present with them hurt in a way I never spoke about. He showed them patience and warmth I rarely received. And I told myself that was enough. That mothers don't need more. Years turned into decades. Life moved forward while I stayed still. I functioned. I survived. I smiled when expected. But somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice kept whispering that something wasn't right. I ignored it. I had learned that listening to myself only led to disappointment. I didn't know it then, but this was the beginning of my disappearance. Not because someone pushed me down, but because I learned how to shrink on my own. And I stayed like that for a very long time. Until one ordinary day changed everything. Years passed quietly, each day blending into the next. I woke up, prepared breakfast, packed lunches, smiled for my children, and made sure the house looked perfect. On the outside, everything seemed fine. But inside, I felt like I was shrinking, slowly losing my shape, my voice, my very presence. I learned to live in the spaces between things, to exist quietly, and to hide the cracks no one would see. Whenever I tried to speak about my feelings, he didn't yell, didn't shout, didn't storm out. He simply didn't understand. Or maybe he understood perfectly, and that was the cruelty, the knowledge that my pain didn't matter enough to change anything. You're imagining things. You're too sensitive. It's not that bad. Those words became my lullaby and my prison. I doubted myself until I started to believe him. I became very good at being invisible. I stopped wearing colors that made me feel alive. I stopped laughing loudly. I stopped sharing my dreams. Even my tears became quieter, sliding down my cheeks in the bathroom with the water running so no one would hear. I began to live for everyone else while disappearing from myself. The children loved him. They admired him. They saw him as kind, patient, dependable. And I wanted them to see that version of him. I didn't want to taint it with my reality. So I carried my pain silently, convinced it was my responsibility to endure, to sacrifice, to be the strong one. But the weight of silence has a way of breaking you. Little things piled on top of each other. A question ignored. A glance missed. A sigh instead of empathy. One evening, I was speaking about my day, sharing something that mattered to me, and he interrupted me mid-sentence with, "Can you just stop talking for a minute?" That sentence hit me like a hammer. Not because it was loud, not because it was cruel, but because it confirmed the truth I had been avoiding for years. My voice didn't matter. My presence wasn't welcomed. My existence was tolerated, not cherished. And in that moment, something inside me cracked open. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, feeling fear, anger, sadness, and clarity all at once. I realized I had spent my life bending, shrinking, and disappearing to keep someone else comfortable. And I understood something terrifying. Staying had cost me more than leaving ever could. I thought about leaving, quietly, cautiously. The idea terrified me. I had lived in this home for decades, molded to someone else's expectations. The thought of stepping out alone felt impossible. And yet, I knew that staying would slowly erase the woman I was left to become. I began to plan quietly. Small steps. Packing in my mind. Sorting in secret. Measuring my courage in whispers. Every day, I built a path toward freedom, even when doubt whispered I was being selfish, ungrateful, dramatic. But deep inside, I knew the voice I had been silencing for so long deserved to be heard. Every night, I practiced imagining life differently. Life where I could speak, laugh, cry, and exist without permission. Life where I was no longer invisible. Life where I chose myself. And slowly, terrifyingly, that imagined life started feeling possible. The breaking point was not dramatic. There was no yelling, no confrontation, no sudden betrayal. It was a quiet Tuesday, an ordinary day that revealed the extraordinary truth. I could not continue like this. I could not keep shrinking. I could not disappear any longer. Leaving was not the end of my pain. It was the beginning of facing the life I had ignored for decades. People think when a woman walks away, she instantly becomes strong and free. But freedom is not given. It is built. Leaving only removed the cage. It did not erase the years I had spent shrinking, silencing, disappearing. The first nights alone were terrifying. The silence was unfamiliar. There was no routine to hide behind, no one to adjust myself for. I sat on the edge of the bed, heart racing, stomach tight. Not because I missed him, but because I had forgotten how to live for myself. When you spend decades bending for someone else, standing tall feels unnatural. Guilt came in waves. I replayed every moment I had failed in his eyes. I questioned myself constantly. Was I selfish? Ungrateful? Dramatic? But then I remembered how lonely I had felt lying next to him for years. And I understood something vital. Loneliness in a marriage is far more painful than loneliness alone. The children struggled too. Not because they didn't love me, but because they had grown accustomed to seeing him as the gentle, present parent. I spoke to them carefully, gently, explaining the truth they could understand. I told them that sometimes love does not shout. Sometimes it quietly starves, and no one should have to erase themselves to keep a family together. Healing was slow and uneven. Some days I felt strong, alive, hopeful. Other days I felt broken and exhausted. I mourned the life I could have had, the woman I might have become, the dreams I had buried to survive. And that grief was heavy, heavier than anger, because it came with acceptance. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, change began. I noticed the way my chest no longer tightened when I spoke. The way my laughter returned without caution. The way I made choices simply because I wanted them. These moments were small but powerful. They were proof that I was reclaiming myself. One morning, I looked in the mirror and didn't rush past my reflection. I stood there, really looked, and saw a woman awake, present, real. Older than she had been, yes, but alive, fully alive for the first time in decades. And I realized that this woman deserved to be seen, heard, and loved by herself first. People judged me. Some still will. They asked why I left a man who never hit me, never raised his voice, never betrayed me. They said I should have endured. But no one lives inside your silence. No one feels themselves disappear day after day until their soul forgets its own name. Life after leaving was not perfect. Some nights were lonely, some mornings heavy. But even on the hardest days, I felt something I had never felt before. Peace. Not happiness, not joy, peace. The kind that lets you breathe fully, without apology, without shrinking. Now my life is quieter, but it is mine. I speak freely. I cry when I need to. I laugh without checking if it's acceptable. I exist without fear. And sometimes, when I catch my reflection, I smile. Because the woman staring back at me survived, reclaimed herself, and chose life on her own terms. If this story resonates with you, hear this clearly. Love should not make you feel invisible. Marriage should not erase you. Staying silent is not strength when it costs you your soul. And it is never too late. Not at 40, not at 60, not even at 70, to finally choose yourself. I didn't leave because I hated him. I didn't leave to punish anyone. I left because I finally loved myself enough to stop disappearing. I deserved to be seen. I deserved to be heard. I deserved a life where I could exist fully. And this time, I chose myself.